It's a cold Tuesday here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee-Jun. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. What will be discussed at the upcoming Korea-China summit as President Moon Jae-in heads to Beijing on Wednesday for his 4-day state visit? The price of Bitcoin has skyrocketed this year, and amid the ongoing Bitcoin craze in Korea, the government is trying to look for ways to regulate the cryptocurrency. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. But first, Korea's export and import prices fell in November for the first time in 5 months. According to preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, import prices dropped 0.4% a month, which is being owed to a stronger Korean won. The central bank said the local currency gained 2.3% against the U.S. dollar last month to an average of 1,105 won, offsetting the rise in global oil prices. Export prices in November also slumped 1.8% a month, with prices of agro-fisheries exports tumbling nearly 3%. Korea's fledgling biotech industry seems to be on a strong growth trend. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the country's biotech industry was worth $8.1 billion as of 2016, up 4.4% compared to a year earlier. The ministry cited notable gains in the demand for biomedical equipment, bioservices, as well as biochemical and energy products. Exports of bio-related products rose as well, up nearly 4% at roughly $4 billion, thanks to high demand for antibodies and hormone products. This has also led to more people being employed in the sector, with the total number of workers in the sector growing 4% on year to nearly 42,000. This morning, the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae released the itinerary for President Moon's 4-day state visit to China. And it looks like the president will not only go to Beijing, but he will also go on a trip nearly 2,000 kilometers away from the Chinese capital. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
There's no doubt President Moon's state visit to China comes at a difficult time, says the Blue House, but it is a monumental and necessary undertaking to normalize relations between the two countries. This following a long diplomatic row over Seoul's deployment of a U.S. THAAD missile defense system and Beijing's economic retaliations. The two countries reached an agreement in late October to set aside their differences, and according to the deputy director of Seoul's National Security Office, it's a chance to focus on the future of bilateral ties.
Presidents Moon and Xi will evaluate the past 25 years since Seoul and Beijing established diplomatic relations in 1992, but also discuss ways to cultivate a future-oriented, strategic partnership while reinforcing exchanges and cooperation in various areas.
The day after President Moon arrives in China, an official welcoming ceremony will be held at the Great Hall of the People. This will be followed by an expanded summit and a small-scale bilateral meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. This will be the third summit meeting between the two heads of state since President Moon took office in May. The two leaders had previously met on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany, as well as the APEC summit in Da Nang, Vietnam. For their latest meeting, they are expected to discuss ways to peacefully resolve the North Korean nuclear issue. Moon's trip to China comes 2 weeks after Pyongyang test-fired an ICBM on November 29, resuming its missile provocations after a 75-day hiatus. They will also exchange views on economic cooperation between the two countries, including ways to link Seoul's new northern and new southern policies to Beijing's One Belt, One Road initiative. The Blue House also said earlier that President Moon will stop by the city of Chongqing during his trip. It's a place of historical significance for Korea, as it's the site of the nation's provisional government during the Japanese occupation period. It is also the linchpin of President Xi's policies focused on China's economic cooperation and development. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
Now, ahead of his trip, President Moon sat down with China's state-run broadcaster CCTV for an interview that aired on Monday night. During that interview, President Moon discussed a wide variety of issues, including THAAD, North Korea, and restoring trust with China. Our Hwang Ho-jun reports.
Restoring bilateral trust. That's what President Moon Jae-in's interview with CCTV could be boiled down to. He stressed that trust is the objective of his third bilateral summit with his Chinese counterpart since taking office, even citing a Chinese proverb, first time a stranger, next an acquaintance, a third time a lifelong friend. During a sit-down interview that took place before President Moon's state visit to China, the Chinese state-run media didn't shy away from asking President Moon about the sensitive issue of South Korea's deployment of the THAAD system on the Korean peninsula.
그래서 사드 문제는 별개로 해결해 나가면서 양국 간의 경제, 문화 또는 정치, 안보.
President Moon re-emphasized that South Korea's decision to deploy THAAD is inevitable due to the need to defend the country from Pyongyang's nuclear and missile provocations. While recognizing China's concern that THAAD might violate China's security interests, he made assurances that Seoul will make sure that the U.S. missile defense system doesn't go beyond its intended goal, stressing that the U.S. is ultimately on the same page. The two countries reached an agreement in late October to set aside their differences. President Moon also asserted that Pyongyang must give up its nuclear ambitions. He said it is delusional for North Korea, a small country with an economy that is lagging behind, to think it can protect its security only with nuclear weapons, and that only peace and cooperation between the two Koreas that can guarantee North Korea's security. Hwang Ho-jun, Business Daily.
Over in the U.S., the Federal Reserve is widely expected to raise interest rates at its December policy meeting on Wednesday. Now, the real point of interest, however, will be on possible hints from the U.S. Central Bank about the pace of rate hikes next year. Our Eunice Kim explains.
The Federal Open Market Committee will meet Tuesday and Wednesday local time, at the conclusion of which the year's third and final rate increase is expected to be announced. A quarter percentage point revision up would put the Fed's key rate at the 1.25 to 1.5% range, still lower than Korea's 1.5% after the Bank of Korea's rate hike last month. But what investors will be looking for are hints to what the pace of rate hikes in 2018 will be. The Fed's September forecast had pointed to 3 more increases in the coming year, followed by 2 more in 2019. That projection has since faced headwinds, on one hand in stubbornly lagging inflation, and on the other hand a strengthening GDP outlook amid low unemployment levels not seen since the early 2000s. Should the Fed follow through with 3 rate hikes, it would put the key rate well over the 2% range, assuming they rise by a quarter percentage point increments. Governor Lee Ju-yeol has affirmed the Korean Central Bank will maintain an accommodative stance. Markets see maybe 2, if not 1, upward revision for the Bank of Korea next year, which would put it behind the pace of the FOMC's. The Fed's press conference, which will happen early Thursday morning Korea time, will be watched with great interest, also given the fact that it could very well be Fed Chair Janet Yellen's final statement and Q&A before she resigns next February. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Korea is the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, with its trading volume accounting for 20% of the global total. Not only that, the Bitcoin frenzy has led the cryptocurrency to be traded at a 20 to 30% premium here in Korea compared to other countries. So with growing concerns of the local Bitcoin market being exposed to higher risks, the government is looking for ways to regulate the virtual currency. Let's take a closer look.
The price of Bitcoin skyrocketed as much as 25 folds recently in Korea over a 1-year period, as wide-eyed investors rushed to join the Bitcoin bandwagon. It even hit a record high of 24.79 million won, or nearly $23,000, at a local exchange last Friday, buoyed by expectations of Sunday's debut of Bitcoin futures trading on the Chicago Board Options Exchange. But prices soon plummeted around 40% in Korea over the weekend on concerns of possible regulations by the government. Korea's finance minister said on Monday that relevant ministries are in discussion to decide whether Bitcoin trading in the country should be subject to oversight. The government's cryptocurrency countermeasures task force will hold a meeting on Friday, and investors are nervously awaiting any announcements in regards to Bitcoin trading.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Junsok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. Great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
So what exactly is going on here in Korea in regards to Bitcoin trading?
Okay, well, I think there's a bit of a bubble blowing, partially because the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Chicago Board Options Exchange have decided to include Bitcoin trading in their portfolio. And I think that's driving a lot of speculative sentiments everywhere in the world, but I think it caught on a lot more in Korea because, well, in Korea for a long time we had record low interest rates. We didn't really have a good investment opportunity, and there's some new innovations now where you can invest in a very little amount of Bitcoin. So anybody can, say, put down 10, 20, or $100 equivalent and get into Bitcoin. And then we have familiarity with electronic currency because, well, we have things like LG Pay, Samsung Pay, Kakao Pay, which makes people, I think, a bit more comfortable with the idea that money can just exist virtually on the internet. So I think those kind of factors, as well as perhaps a bit of a gambling instinct. I wouldn't really call it Bitcoin investment right now, but I think it's more of a gambling. I think that mentality is also playing into the picture.
All right, and like you mentioned, contract futures for Bitcoin began trading Sunday evening on the CBOE global markets, which is the first traditional platform in serving this currency. So tell us more about this.
Okay, well, once you get into CBOE, there's a fixed set of rules that you have to follow for transparency and how you transact. So, and I think the fact that they were recognized by CME and CBOE, it means that there's enough volume and enough attention paid to this currency so that the Chicago exchanges believe that there's an opportunity here for them to do some trading here, and there's some value added that they can add because, well, so far transactions have been somewhat uneven and unclear.
Right.
And then in a lot of Asian countries, they already have smaller exchanges, so I think they thought that it was a good profit opportunity for them. So there's enough volume out there, and there's enough potential demand there, so that I think that's why they went into the Bitcoin trading.
Now, but some are saying that we might be seeing more volatile price fluctuations from here on out.
Okay, well, an interesting thing about prices, when you get into the nitty-gritty of theory, there's part of prices which are determined by fundamentals. So that's what you need it for say, housing you need it to live in, and how much are there actual housing that's built. Those type of things are fundamentals. And then we have a bubble component of prices. Usually when we do theory, we say that the bubble component of the price is part of the price where it's nothing but future expectation. So you don't buy housing for you to live in, you just buy housing because you think that the price is going to go up and up. Now, the thing about Bitcoin is that there's not really an anchor. There's not really that much of a fundamentals there. You can't use Bitcoin for anything except trading and buying and selling.
Right.
Merchandise, it was originally designed to be a transaction currency, but because of the volatility, it doesn't really have a good use for transactions now because, well, you don't want to use a currency where one day it's loaf of bread is worth $10, the other day, next day it's worth 50 cents. So there's really very little fundamental part of it, so it's mostly driven by the bubble component. And since there's no anchor here, the bubble can rise as high as it wants and as low as it wants. Usually, currencies sometimes have the same problem, but you have central banks to try to control that bubble.
Yes.
That's partially why they try to control for inflation. But Bitcoin, you don't have a central bank to control it.
Right.
Now, some people like it because of that. There's no regulation by central bank, but I think that's why it's the price is so volatile.
So, and going along with that, so the Korean government is trying to come up with ways to regulate Bitcoin. Now, what can we expect on this front?
Okay, well, it's ironic, but CBOE is starting to sell Bitcoin futures, and Korea said that Bank of Korea and the financial authorities said that in Korea it'll be not allowed to buy and sell the futures. And the financial authorities are right now considering banning Bitcoin transactions altogether. This is a bit ironic because, well, just up to last year, they were saying that these type of virtual currencies can represent future opportunities for Korea. So it's very ironic, but I think they realize that the current demand for Bitcoin is largely speculative-driven, bubble-driven. So I think they're trying to pop it as quickly as possible.
So I think there's that dilemma of finding the middle ground between regulated Bitcoin and developing blockchain technology, I guess, as part of the government's efforts to prepare for the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Right. Now, Bitcoin is one of the plethora of virtual currencies. I think Bitcoin has three really important characteristics. One is it's an electronic currency, but it's not the only electronic currency. We use credit card and check cards. Those are also electronic currency. Then it uses blockchain technology, which acts like a torrent, so it's recorded everywhere, and it records all transactions to anonymously and through cryptography. It's the third characteristic which is really driving the problem, which is that there's no central authority and the supply is more or less fixed. Now, people can, quote, mine, unquote, for these Bitcoins, but the amount is strictly limited. And because the demand side is, as I mentioned before, unanchored, I think that creates just a lot of opportunities for very large volatility in prices. And that makes it very attractive, I think, for speculators and people who like gambling. Because basically, when you have that much of a component in price driven by the bubble component, you're basically betting on psychology. So if people feel optimistic, the price is going to get higher than any other commodity. If people feel pessimistic, then it's going to go lower than any other commodity. So you're going to be stuck with volatile prices.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today on this ongoing Bitcoin frenzy in Korea and around the world. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Korea's Agriculture Ministry has confirmed an outbreak of the highly pathogenic H5N6 strain of avian influenza at a duck farm in Yeongam County in southwestern Korea. To prevent the virus from spreading further, 76,000 ducks in the area have been culled. And this brings the total number of confirmed cases to 4 so far in this winter season, following 2 outbreaks in the Jeollado region and 1 on Jeju Island last month. Quarantine officials have imposed a standstill order on poultry movement and stepped up disinfection measures at nearby farms. Officials are hoping the country can avoid a repeat of last year's crisis when more than 30 million birds were slaughtered to contain Korea's worst ever bird flu outbreak. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon has called for swift countermeasures to prevent the further spread of AI ahead of next year's Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Concerning the recent outbreak of avian influenza at a duck farm in Yeongam County in the southwestern of Korea, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon said Tuesday the government would tighten its quarantine efforts. The Prime Minister said all ducks within a 3-kilometer radius of the site were slaughtered to prevent the spread of AI, and that disinfection measures were being stepped up at nearby farms. Quarantine officials have issued transportation bans and increased in-depth inspections of ducks at nearby farms. The confirmation brings the number of cases this winter season to 4, following 2 outbreaks in the southwest of the country and 1 on Jeju Island last month. The government hopes to avoid a repeat of last year, where more than 30 million birds were slaughtered to contain Korea's worst ever bird flu outbreak. During the meeting, the Prime Minister also said Incheon International Airport's newly built second passenger terminal will be ready for service on January 18th next year. He emphasized the need to undergo numerous simulations for immigration, quarantine, and customs checks to minimize any problems when the terminal opens. The Prime Minister called on the Justice, Agriculture, and Transportation Ministries and the Customs Service to dispatch officials to the airport for administrative assistance. He says safety, hygiene, and convenience were critical for Incheon to become an airport hub. Kim Young-git, Business Daily.
The Moon administration has said that startups and small businesses will be crucial to Korea in staying competitive in the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, to help local startups, the government plans to expand the country's startup complex located in the city of Pangyo, south of Seoul, and offer discounts on the use of office space. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us more.
During an economic meeting on Monday led by Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon, the government unveiled plans to expand its startup complex in Pangyo, south of Seoul, as part of efforts to facilitate job creation through innovation.
As seen in the case of Silicon Valley in the U.S. and Zhongguancun in China, creating an innovation hub is vital for the development of a healthy startup ecosystem. I hope Pangyo becomes a place where innovative business ideas can be realized and synergy effects are created through collaboration.
Some 1,400 firms are to move into the western part of the new 430,000 square meter complex to use it as a workspace and receive consulting services at cheap prices. Construction of the eastern part of the complex will be finished by 2022. Office space called Innovation Town will also be provided for small and medium-sized venture firms, and mentoring booths will be installed for prospective startup founders. The government will designate 3 consortiums spearheaded by large venture firms as startup accelerators to help provide equipment and investment. A test site will also be created for industries related to innovative IT sectors, including the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, drones, and healthcare. Pangyo Techno Valley is home to many technology companies, including Korea's leading game developer NCSoft. The number of companies operating there surpassed 1,100 as of the end of 2015, with combined sales of over $64 billion. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Korea will hold a nationwide shopping event early next year for foreigners called a Korea Grand Sale, offering discounts on flights, accommodations, tours, and restaurants. One part of its aim is to boost the number of foreign tourists during next year's Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. The Visit Korea Committee said Monday that the sales will take place over a 42-day period from January 18th through the end of February. Gangwon-do Province, where the Winter Games are also taking place, also has numerous events in store in hopes of getting more people to come and watch the Olympics. A new freight rail line opened this week, linking Korean cities to Europe by cutting directly across mainland China. The route is much faster than the current Trans-Siberian and Trans-Mongolian railways, which also connect Korea and Europe. Our Park Ji-won has the story.
A new Trans-China freight railway service has been launched, directly linking South Korea to European destinations. According to Korea's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Hyundai Merchant Marine Corporation, in partnership with SJ Logistics Group, concluded the necessary contracts in November and began taking orders earlier this month. The new freight railway uses TCR, or Trans-China Railway, which directly passes through mainland China. This marks the first time for a Korean freight railway service to use TCR. So far, TSR, or Trans-Siberian Railway, or TMR, Trans-Mongolian Railway, have been used to link South Korea and Europe. The TSR service usually takes around a month to deliver cargo from Korea to Europe, but the new Trans-China Railway route is expected to cut that time by around a week and a half. Quoting unnamed government officials, Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reports that the route is not yet price competitive, but efforts are ongoing to bring costs down through further negotiations with local Chinese governments. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.